Well, since their first appearance in the New Yorker as cartoons, the Addams family have now been around for several generations in many different forms now. And in all versions, the Addams subvert social norms with their unique, macabre lifestyle. And you wouldn't expect this from a group of people, a family even, that live in such a macabre way, to be wholesome. And yet, that's really what we see from the Addams family. Though they often show it in odd ways, the Addams clearly care for other people. They show love to others. Within their own group, their family butler, Lurch, as he's getting ready to go on a date, everyone in the family, young and old alike, all come together to help him so that he'll do well, that he'll have a good date. With that said, Morticia and Gomez are one of the most healthy and loving couples that we see in any form of media, even if their displays of affection often come at the embarrassment of their own children as well as those around them. Sometimes the Addams family has a weird way of showing love. They do show it. You might not expect to see this kind of love from a family with such a macabre lifestyle. And yet, we do. Really, we find examples of how we're supposed to be in this world from the most unlikely places. Take our reading from 1 Samuel this morning. There we hear about Saul, the king of Israel, who has fallen out of favor because he's failed to fully trust in the Lord. Now, Saul, as the first king of Israel, really fits the part, fits our expectations of what a king would be. Earlier in 1 Samuel, when he makes his appearance, just before he gets anointed as king, we see Saul described as a very tall man, someone we would expect a warrior, a king, to be. And following in Hollywood fashion, we also get a description of Saul as a very handsome man, too. Exactly the kind of person we'd envision in this role. Now, Samuel is getting ready to anoint a new king, because a new king is needed, one who will find God's favor. And Saul goes, as God commands him, to the house of Jesse to find this new king. He goes and he looks at all of Jesse's sons, and each one he sees, he thinks, oh my goodness, this must be the one. This must be the one that God wishes me to anoint. God reminds Samuel that the Lord does not see as mortal sees. They look on outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. See, the one that God chooses is the one we would least suspect. He chooses the youngest of Jesse's sons, the one who was not even called in because as the youngest, his role is to tend the sheep. David is a poet. David, as we will hear later when he goes up against Goliath, is even too small to fit into the armor that they give him. He's a tiny person. Although we do also hear, again in Hollywood fashion, that he also is very handsome. Regardless of that, though, David is not the image of a warrior, not the image of a king. And yet he fills both roles and does so in such a way that he is honored generations and generations after. He's honored so much even that God chooses to come into this world through David's line. God often chooses the ones we least expect. And we see this in our reading in the gospel today. We'd expect God to show favor on people like the Pharisees, those who follow the rules. After all, Jesus himself follows in the tradition of the Pharisees, albeit though he often clashes with the leadership of that group. Our own faith, as well as the faith, the current iteration of the faith of our Jewish brethren, we all take our traditions, we all descend in a fashion from the Pharisees. So it seems like they would be the ones that God would choose. And yet, instead, the one God looks for, the one God shows favor to, is this blind man, a man whose name were never given, a man who everyone around him thought was steeped in sin, or at the very least his parents had done something quite atrocious for him to have been born blind. Yet this is the one that God favors. And as Jesus says, I came into this world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind. God reverses our expectations. God reverses our expectations once again. God calls on us to be different from those around us. Ephesians is written to the Gentiles in that area of Ephesus in Greek. So here we have a group of Greek Gentiles, and they would have been steeped in the customs, the world around them. And yet this letter calls the Ephesians to give that life up. The letter reminds us, the letter reminds them, once you were in darkness, but now in the Lord you are light. Live as children of light. And this is not just a call to the Ephesians, but it is a call to us as well. God's ways are not our ways. And that is a very good thing, because salvation could not come to us otherwise. To truly follow God, we cannot live into the ways of the world around us. We cannot fit into the expectations of others. Instead, we must live in the ways that God has set before us. Instead of continuing in darkness, we must now walk in light. Instead of following the world, we are called to follow God. And that's no matter how strange, kooky, or unconventional that way may appear to those around us.